Good evening. The time is 6:30 PM and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance, please. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Jeffrey,
Here.
Trustee Westcott,
Here.
Trustee White,
Here.
Trustee Bristow,
Here.
Trustee Tapey,
Here.
Trustee Cohen.
Here. Thank you. I would like to invite Mr. Roadway up to, I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Now moving on to public comment. Mr. Roadway, would you please come up to the podium? You'll need to push the button so that the red light turns on and state your name and address for the record, sir.
My name's Darren Roadway. I live at 329 Lilac Drive. The illegal food truck operation that is next door to me at 331 Lilac Circle still has a commercial dumpster there. It stinks so bad. It smells like there's dead body parts in there. Nothing's being done about this. I've contacted members of the council as well as the town manager. And I'm here now again requesting that something be done. I shouldn't have to live next to a commercial dumpster that smells like dead body parts. You can't walk by without almost having to throw up. So that's what I'm bringing before the people at this meeting right now. I did it before. Nothing's been done. Here it is a year later. I've been living with this for 3 years and nothing's being done. So if nothing is done, then I will be forced to bring a civil lawsuit against the city of Lochbuie. That's it.
Thank you very much for being here tonight and bringing your concerns to us. Was there anyone online wishing to make public comment? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda for the benefit of the people in the room. Our consent agenda includes the payment approval report for June 18th in the amount of $392,377.49. The payment approval report for July 2nd, 2024 in the amount of $236,959.12. The minutes from the June 4th meeting, the minutes from the June 11th special meeting, ordinance 2024-698 and resolution 2024-36. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Trustee Bristow,
Yes.
Trustee Cohen,
Yes.
Trustee White,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Jeffrey,
Yes.
Trustee Tapey,
Yes.
Trustee Westcott.
Yes. And the motion carries. We are moving on to action items. The first action item is an action to appoint mayor to serve until the next regular election due to our vacancy in office. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this before we Have trustees chime in. Does anybody have questions or conversation about this action item?
I'd like to make a motion. I would like to move that the board appoint Jamie Jeffrey as our mayor until the next election.
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Jamie Jeffrey as mayor until the next regular election. Any further discussion? Being none, we'll call for roll call, please.
Trustee White,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Jeffrey.
I will abstain. Thank you. And the motion carries. Thank you all so very much. Could we just make a note at this time to put the trustee vacancy up for discussion at our next meeting? Thank you. All right, action item B is in regards to receipt and possible action on a motion to reconsider that was filed by the town of Hudson related to annexation of BNSF annexation petition number 1. Like to poll each of you for comments and response to this motion to reconsider. Start with you, trustee Cohen.
I reviewed the motion to reconsider and Hudson's allegations therein, and it's my intent not to grant the motion for annexation number 1.
Thank you. Trustee Westcott.
I have reviewed the motion to reconsider filed by the town of Hudson and also do not believe that we need to reconsider the action that we took in our previous motion, in our previous meeting. So I do not believe we need to reconsider.
Thank you. Trustee White.
I've also read the motion and agreed that we do not need to reconsider.
Thank you. Trustee Bristow.
I have read the motion and reconsideration isn't necessary for this action.
And trustee Tapey.
I am in agreement. I've read the motion, reviewed the motion, and I deny the motion.
Thank you. I also reviewed the motion and I also do not intend to grant it. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion here this evening?
I move to direct the town attorney to draft written findings and conclusions in support of this board's decision to deny the motion for reconsideration on NSF annexation number 1.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. May we have roll call, please?
Trustee White,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
And the motion carries. Our next action item is in regards to a motion to consider filed by the town of Hudson related to annexation of Southweld Holdings annexation petition number 2. So we would like to, at this time, acknowledge a receipt of that motion to reconsider. And I would like to have each trustee weigh in on their thoughts regarding this motion to reconsider. Trustee Tapey.
I have reviewed the motion and do not feel that it needs to be considered at this time.
Thank you, trustee Bristow.
I've read the motion and reconsideration is again not necessary.
Thank you, trustee White.
I too have read the motion and do not feel that reconsideration is necessary.
Thank you, trustee Westcott.
I reviewed the motion and do not feel like it merits reconsideration.
Thank you, trustee Cohen.
I also reviewed the motion and not believe we need to reconsider.
Thank you. I also have reviewed this motion to reconsider annexation of Southweld Holdings annexation petition number 2, and I do not intend to grant that motion to reconsider. Is there a motion at this time from our board?
I move to direct the town attorney to draft written findings and conclusions in support of this board's decision to deny the motion for reconsideration on Southweld Holdings annexation petition number 2. And to bring such written findings and conclusions back before this board on July 16th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May I have roll call, please?
Trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee White,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey.
Yes. And the motion carries. Action item D is our response to receipt and possible action on a motion to reconsider that was filed by the town of Hudson related to annexation of Southweld Holdings annexation petition number 3. Trustee Westcott, may I poll for your thoughts regarding this motion to reconsider, please?
I reviewed this motion as well and do not feel like it merits reconsideration.
Trustee White?
I have also read the motion and do not believe it warrants a reconsideration.
Thank you, trustee Cohen.
I've reviewed the motion and do not believe it merits reconsideration.
Thank you, trustee Bristow.
I've read the motion and again, reconsideration is not necessary.
Thank you, trustee Tapey.
I have reviewed the motion and do not intend to grant the motion for reconsideration.
Thank you, and I concur with all of you. Having reviewed the motion, I do not intend to grant it. Is there a motion for this board?
I move to direct the town attorney to draft written findings and conclusions in support of this board's decision to deny the motion for reconsideration on Southweld Holdings annexation petition number 3. And to bring such written findings and conclusions back before this board on July 16th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes,
trustee White,
Yes.
and the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Action item E is in regards to resolution 2024-37, selecting landmark structures for design, construction, and installation of a 2 million gallon composite elevated water tank, and authorizing the town administrator to execute the construction contract and related documents in an amount not to exceed $10,607,300. Mr. Larman?
Good evening. Before you tonight, you have staff and JVA's recommendation to award this project to Landmark Structures. The town on May 8th issued a RFP, which was published on BidNet Direct Colorado and as well on the town's website. We administered this RFP in compliance with the town's purchasing policy and under the general guidance of the town attorney's office. After review of the submittal from Landmark, we did only receive one on this solicitation. But we have found that Landmark meets all of the requirements. They provided all the necessary documentation. And after review of the references provided, staff and JVA both recommend award of this project to Landmark. Kelsey is here virtually with JVA, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, are there any questions regarding this?
My question is about the matrix that was used to do the scoring, and I realized there's only one bid, but I still have a little bit of a concern about the low score that JVA assigned regarding the previous experience of this vendor in cold weather conditions. And that I do see the note that Iowa was not considered to be similar. So since it seems like this work is gonna be possibly moving into the winter time, I'd like to understand what our exposure is there as the town.
So I did, well, that's too much. I did notice that also, and you'll see that I scored it differently. I accounted for the experience that Landmark has building in Canada as part of their cold weather experience, and JVA did not. They looked solely in the United States. So.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions regarding this project? Great, seeing none. Is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 2024-37, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Log Buoy, Colorado, selecting Landmark Structures 1 LP for design, construction, and installation of a 2 million gallon composite elevated water tank and authorizing the town administrator to execute the construction contract and related documents in an amount not to exceed $10,607,300.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I believe trustee White would like further discussion regarding the motion and second, which is allowable.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what I'm allowed to say or not say at this point. Earlier today, I came into this town hall and picked up my packet, and in doing so, I had a conversation with AJ where some information was shared that I think needs to be shared with the entire board and not just myself. Would now be the appropriate time to do that. I'm looking at the attorney, I guess.
Well, there's a motion on the table and it's debatable, so you can share information to the extent that you're debating that motion.
Okay, well, I would like to say that earlier today, then during this conversation, I walked into the office and was talking to AJ about prior concerns I've expressed with this bid process and JVA and the allegations that were made by the two other companies, the 2 out of 3 that were involved the first time. And AJ told me that during this process of me asking for more information and us gathering information and getting more details from the town, as well as the Cora request, I guess, that was submitted by one of these other companies, they did define that JVA was having side conversations with Landmark at that time. And now this time, they're the only bidder on this project. So that's a huge concern. They were already having side conversations the first time. Now we're still paying the same company to work for us again. And now the company that they were having hush-hush conversations with is the only bidder on this project. I'm highly uncomfortable making any award.
So based on us debating the motion in a second, it would be your recommendation to other members of the board that they vote in favor or against approval of this?
I would vote, everyone should be against this, or at a minimum, we should be tabling this and going over the same details that I was given earlier today. You guys are not informed. So I would say everyone should be voting no.
Thank you, trustee White. Head, Mr. Yokert.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just expand on some of that conversation. What I did mention is, yeah, that information did come out in the core request. And then I sent earlier before this meeting on the requests I had for more information I had received from trustee Bristow that the process went much smoother this time. There has been no contest, and the team with JVA had been reshuffled. So none of the folks that were working on that first bid process were involved in this one. So any irregularities that may have occurred did not occur this round.
I would like to argue that you can't ensure that, and there's a such thing as company culture. So if this behavior is acceptable by one person who was heading our project, it just seems highly, I understand now why at the last meeting we had public comment by these same people who came in and said that they felt like it was more obscure this time to even apply. No wonder why they didn't bid, because it definitely feels like there's something inside happening between these two companies.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in favor of, since we've had one speak against approving this?
I would just like to hear either from Chris or as to your feelings about these concerns.
Thank you. So during this bid process, we set up strict protocols for communication. And that was highly conveyed through the bid documents, the advertisement to bid, as well as at the pre-bid conference, that all communication is to be directed through an email address that we set up specifically for this project, which is bids@lochbuie.org. And that was the only official correspondence and the only place to submit questions and receive answers. And I have all of the emails from that, and there is, I was the outward facing representative of the town for this entire bid process. JVA did not interact with any of the bidders other than at the pre-bid conference. When we had questions received from bidders, they went to that email address. I got the information for the technical side of things, and then I created the addendums to the bid and published them at the different venues. So that being said, I have a high level of confidence that there was probably not any opportunity behind the scenes that would have had any bearing on this current bid process. We also highly involved the town attorney's office through this entire process, just to have that added layer of security for the board and the town as a precaution.
Thank you, Mr. Larman.
So let me ask then, did you also review the initial bid from Phoenix?
From the first bid, yes, we did. During that process, we did.
And did you have any issues at that time with that bid proposal?
Me personally,
Yeah, upon your review, was there anything?
yes, in my opinion, they did not submit documented experience to be working on 2 million gallon tanks or in cold weather climates.
And go ahead, trustee Tapie.
Chris, was there any type of explanation or did you hear from the other companies that put in a bid and the first time, a reason why they would not rebid?
I have not heard from them as to why they did not bid. I personally reached out to all the previous bidders at the onset of this solicitation, made them aware that we were back out to bid, provided them the information on places to bid. All 3 previous bidders did attend the pre-bid conference, and that is the only correspondence that we had with the other 2 bidders. The questions that were received were only from the company that we're recommending tonight, Landmark. There has been no other correspondence through bids@lochbuie.org from any of the other bidders.
Anybody else? Trustee Westcott?
As a thought experiment, should we tonight choose not to award this bid, what would be the implications for this project?
Well, some of the implications that I can think of just immediately is that this tank was called out in 2016 as being a need for the town in the 2016 water system master plan. It not having this tank online could potentially put us at risk for our water supply if we should have a major water leak or a major water demand. Some of the other things would be cost. Just in the few months between these two solicitations, the cost has certainly escalated in the neighborhood of $200,000, which is just the rate of inflation for these type of construction materials. So there would be, the impact to the water distribution system as well as some financial implications.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Trustee Cohen,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee White,
No.
trustee Bristow,
No.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Action item F is a continued matter per published notice of public hearing on whether BNSF annexation number 2, as more particularly described in resolution number 2024-22, approved May 6, 2024, meets the applicable requirements of section 30 of Article 2 of the Colorado Constitution and Colorado Revised Statutes 31-12-104 and 31-12-105, and is eligible for annexation to the town of Loch Bowie. The time is 6:57 PM, and I am opening the public hearing for this matter. Is there a motion?
I move to continue this hearing to July 16th, 2024 at 6:30 PM at Town Hall at 703 Weld County Road 37 and by Zoom, as the matter is being held in abeyance pursuant to CRS section 31-12-114.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue this matter. Roll call, please.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee White,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
Bristow,
Yes.
Thank you, and this is continued to July 16th. Similarly, a continued matter per published notice of public hearing on whether BNSF annexation number 3, as more particularly described in resolution number 2024-23, approved May 6, 2024, meets the applicable requirements of section 30 of Article 2 of the Colorado Constitution and CRS 31-12-104 and 31-12-105, and is eligible for annexation to the town of Loch Bowie. I am opening this public hearing at 6:59 PM.
I move to continue this hearing to July 16th, 2024 at 6:30 PM at Town Hall, 703 Weld County Road 37. As the matter is being held in abeyance pursuant to CRS section 31-12-114.
We have a motion and a second to continue this matter to July 16th. Roll call, please.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Tapey, trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
Yes.
trustee White,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next on our agenda is staff and attorney updates. Does anybody have something they'd like to share this evening?
Well, I'll just be brief with our upcoming meetings. Town offices are closed tomorrow, or no, Thursday, for Independence Day holiday. As usual, town offices are closed on Fridays. Our next board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 16th. And then Saturday, July 27th, we have our Lock Buoy Night at Oasis Family Aquatic Park. That's in Brighton. And regarding the closure, we had a issue with our social media post on the closure, but that's since been corrected, so. That's all I have at the moment. Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions for our staff? Mr. Martin, do you have anything for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor Jeffrey. I have no updates tonight.
Thank you. We'll move on to mayor and trustee comments then. Oh, who should I pick to go first? Trustee Westcott.
I'm excited to have the opportunity to work with you as mayor. I think it's going to be fun and exciting. I would just throw out there that we probably need to find someone to serve as mayor pro tem. So I think that should be Dawn Cohen. I think she'd be great. So I'd like to nominate Dawn as mayor pro tem until the next election cycle. If anybody would like to second that, and then we could just make it happen.
We have a motion and a second. Don, would you be willing to accept this nomination?
Yes, and thank you very.
Can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
trustee Cohen,
I'll abstain.
trustee White,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Tapey.
Wow. Congratulations, Mayor Pro Tem Cohen.
All, and I should have probably asked what my responsibilities will be, but hopefully someone will explain that.
I'm gonna quit running meetings and you can run them all. Just kidding. How about comments from you tonight?
Well, I do have just a couple of things. So I got to go to CML and had the pleasure of having some time to get to know trustee White a little bit more, and also got to participate in lots of sessions, so that was great. One of the things that having some time to get to know another trustee made me think about, and I've had some discussion with some other people who know stuff about this, is that, you know, we all come in here twice a month and sort of sit in our assigned seats. And so we have our opportunity to kind of know our end of the table. And so someone I know, we were having a discussion about this, recommended that maybe we discuss a little process change, that we mix up our seating arrangement at every meeting. Sorry, Heather, because that puts more on you, but so I thought I would throw that out there as a recommendation if you guys were willing to try that out, that we just sort of mix it up and everybody sort of has a chance to. I know we don't talk a lot in the meeting, but you know, just kind of see it from a different perspective. The second thing was I attended a session about quasi judicial matters, and that was very interesting. And one of the things that it brought to my mind is I would like us to discuss a little bit of change in process when we have a quasi judicial matter, to maybe have a little bit of the script to read for whoever's running that meeting, to make sure that our public who is in attendance, and even to remind us here what the responsibilities and really constraints of this board are. I think we all come knowing that there are some things, you know, we're sort of held within the parameters of our job and what our ordinances are, but people sitting out in the audience may not. They think we get to come here and just say what we think or feel, and that's not really true. And also maybe similarly have somewhat of a script for public comments, so that our public who bothered to come here and tell us how they feel understand that it's not really a conversation, and that's not because we don't care, but that's just how the process is. And now I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Those were great ones. Thank you very much for sharing that tonight. Trustee Westcott, did you have more? Because I kind of just like breezed right over you.
The only other thing was, I just wanted to say thank you to trustee White and trustee Cohen for going to CML. I think that's, it's a big time commitment and I appreciated their willingness to do that. They come back educated and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I also share that sentiment. Trustee Tapey.
We'll turn it on first. Kennedy, it's cool to see that quick trip area is starting to come around and see some dirt work going on. That's nice to see. It looks like progress and that's a good thing. I also would like to just wish everybody a happy 4th and just maybe thoughts on reviewing the Declaration of Independence. We're in a weird time in our nation right now. And that's an important celebration. So I hope everybody has a safe and happy 4th.
Thank you. Trustee Bristow.
I don't have anything tonight, but yeah. I plan to bring a lot more conversation to upcoming meetings going forward.
Thank you, Trustee White.
Excited for both of you in your new positions. We talked about this. She was trying to get out of it up there. She's like, not me, Mayor Pro Tem. Thought she'd be great too. So I'm glad to have you guys serving in that way. It's definitely a daunting task. I mean, just looking through, the executive session and stuff, it's a thankless job. And I know somebody had to step up. I know all of you might have not intended to be in that place, but it's appreciated from both of you guys. And I really don't have much else besides, I guess, just AJ, my last email that I sent about like the traffic stuff. I'm fine doing that. So would it be like this at the end next time I would do it, or is it during the meeting?
We should do that during the discussion time instead of kind of reports, I think. So, but yeah, we can fit that in and
Then a heads
have
up, I'm planning on having a little bit stuff about some traffic and stuff around the roundabouts. Also at CML, I just had some downtime and I was looking at Colorado laws and, setbacks from yield signs and things like that. I mean, they're just being crushed every day over there by the school and with the new development and, these new rooftops and people inside them, numbers are coming up. We know that the numbers at the school are changing, going preschool through 8 and traffic needs to be high on our alert. Hopefully we can get it looked at before the school year actually starts. That's kind of my goal. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee White. And for me, thank you all for voting me in as mayor. I feel very respected and appreciate your trust in me. Definitely will give it my best effort. And I wanted to just say, I really appreciated the change with the Oasis night, not having to pick up vouchers this year, because I think it is hard for some of our residents to get here, even though we're open extended hours 4 days a week. Like I find it hard for me sometimes on some busy weeks. So I'm hoping we have a really good turnout at the end of July when families can just show up with some proof that they live in our community. So I appreciate all of you helping get the word out around that as well. And that's all I have. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. One more quick thing, just May, at the last meeting, I really appreciated you considering the fact that 2 of us weren't here to make the decision. I think that really speaks a lot to everybody's character. So I did hear that. I went back and heard the recording. So thank you for that. I just wanted to get that on record.
Thank you. And moving on to discussion, we have the Town of Lochbuie and Highlands Development Water Supply and Demand Overview. Who's going to bring this up?
I think I'll just start it off. So if anyone would like a paper copy, I have those available. I like to write notes on mine. But this is related to what's commonly referred to sometimes as a dual system for primarily outdoor irrigation in a subdivision. Subdivision in question is called the Highlands. It's over on the east side of I-76, approximately 700 acres. So we've been working on different pieces and parts of that, but this is a really neat component, a wise use of water for this. And in the, giving the presentation tonight is Matt Bliss. Drew is also here with the developer. And then our water attorney, Steve Jeffers, and water engineer, Chris Sanchez, are also here for a lively, robust discussion. And that's all I have. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you, trustees, for the opportunity and staff for the opportunity to be here. And Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, congratulations on your new roles. So I've been asked to, my name is Matt Bliss. I work with Di Natale Water Consultants, and we're working with Southwell Holdings, who is the owner of the Highlands property. And the Highlands property is just on the other side of I-76, right around County Road 4. But that's the property we're talking about. And what I've been asked to do is provide an overview of the Lochbuie water system. And then what Highlands Development is proposing to do, what AJ just mentioned, this dual system, which would be 2 separate water systems, one for indoor water use, potable use, and then a separate non-potable system for outdoor irrigation use. And then because that's a different system than Lochbuie has, there's some different water dedication amounts and processes that we will be asking you to consider. So with that, I'm going to just jump in. This first slide here is a map and a schematic of the Lochbuie system, water supply system. And so on the left side, the map, you can see on the left-hand side of the map is the South Platte River. That flows from south to north. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it goes up on the map. And you can see a dashed line. Let's see if I can hope it's going to show up on the screen. Oh, look at that. Okay, great. So this dashed line here is a structure known as the BB pipeline. And what that does is it brings raw water from the South Platte River into Bar Lake. And then from Bar Lake, that water is delivered into the BBC Canal. And what that water does is it replaces a depletion to the BBC Canal caused by your wells. So every well in a shallow alluvial aquifer like we have here in Lochbuie causes a depletion to the stream system. It's basically a hole in the river is what some people think. So you have to bring water in to replace that hole. So that's what your raw water supply does, is it replaces that hole in the river that's caused by your well pumping. The wells from the town are up here in town, and then the BBC Canal is the dark blue line that goes from Bar Lake north. So that's where the depletions are occurring to that BBC Canal, and water is brought through the pipeline, through Bar Lake, and into the BBC Canal to replace those depletions. So replacing those pumping depletions is what protects other water rights and allows you to use those wells. So just on a simple basis on the schematic here is basically what's shown on the map, just simplified. The BB pipeline in green brings water over into Bar Lake. Your wells pump and create a pumping depletion to that BBC Canal. Your water, after it's pumped from the wells, goes to your water treatment plant, your reverse osmosis treatment plant. It's then delivered out to homes and businesses in Lochbuie. And then wastewater returns to your wastewater sewer plant, and that water then is treated and then is discharged back to the canal. So the combination of water that comes from your wastewater treatment plant and water that comes through Bar Lake is what offsets those pumping depletions. That's what allows your system to operate within the water rights system. So what does the water use look like in Lochbuie? This is annual water use over the past 7 or 8 years, starting in 2015 up through 2023. So basically the top line of the bars, that's how much water has been pumped by your wells. So on the left side is acre feet of pumping. And so starting off in 2015, you're about 750 acre feet or so, up to 1,200 acre feet in 2022. An acre foot of water, just to put it in perspective, is 1 acre, 1 foot deep. And it's about 325,000 gallons. So roughly 2 to 3 typical single family homes will use an acre foot of water every year. So pumping has been increasing through 2022. 2023, it was down because if you remember, it was a really wet spring. And so people don't water as much. What the different colors that are in these bars represent is the way that the town has been able to replace those depletions. So if you think of the total height of the bar is the total amount of depletions, okay, each of these colors represents a fraction of that replacement. And the bottom roughly about half of the pumping depletions, it's replaced by your wastewater effluent. So some of that water use goes into your homes. It goes down the drain, gets treated at the wastewater treatment plant, places those pumping depletions. The next largest source then is the renewable water sources. These are things like your new water right or newish water right in United Reservoir number 3. That's water that's brought over from the South Platte River through Bar Lake. Excuse me. Your Denver Basin wells, that's a relatively small amount. It's only been used one time. Those are the wells that are in Douglas County. So those are the deep non-tributary wells. Water's pumped out of the ground and delivered all the way from the Castle Rock area down to Lockwood. So you have a variety of different sources to meet your pumping depletion obligations. So taking all those bars and combining them into one picture so you can get a sense of the percentage of how much your depletions are, or how your depletions are met. You have this large blue, that's the effluent. So about 56% or so of your pumping depletions is replaced by the wastewater coming back through your wastewater plant. Again, that light blue was the United number 3 reservoir right. It's also, you have an agreement with FRICO, which is the owner of the irrigation company here with Bar Lake, for 84 CW 90. That's the name of their water court case that has that water right. Excuse me. And the Fulton Ditch, they have some shares in Fulton Ditch and a variety of other sources. Excuse me. So this next slide just shows what seasonal use looks like in the town and how we determine how much water is indoor use versus outdoor use. So in the wintertime, at Silver Peaks, I'm sorry, this is in the Silver Peaks development. In the indoor winter season, we see use right around about 5,000 gallons per month gets used. And then as you see, each of these lines here, as you get into the winter or into the summer months, you have use going up because that's when people are watering outdoors. And so you have quite a bit more use in the summertime for that irrigation component. And what's important about that is when you're constructing a water treatment plant, you have to build the plant big enough to meet that peak demand. So that peak demand happens in July and August. And that comes to be about 555 gallons per day. This is again for an average home in the Silver Peaks development. And then in comparison, water use in the wintertime is about a fourth of that, 140 gallons per day. So the significant difference. Oh, so much. Appreciate that. So there's a significant amount of water treatment plant capacity that you have to build just to meet that peak demand. Whereas if you're only meeting the demand for indoor use, the capacity need is much smaller. So that's one major benefit of a dual system, is that you only need about a fourth of the water treatment plant capacity per home as compared to a typical home that has outdoor use. And I should have mentioned, if you have any questions in the interim, feel free to interrupt. So moving on to the Highlands potential development scenario. On the left here is the map of the Highlands area. And what's being considered right now is on the north end would be an industrial area, warehouses, commercial, industrial, that would support the BNSF development. And then to the south would be residential growth areas. And as I mentioned before, what we're proposing is a separate non-potable system that outdoor use. Wow, this water is not quite helping me. I'm sorry about that. Sorry, I'm continuing to cough. And what we're seeing is that we think that this indoor-outdoor use component is being considered by a lot of different communities. We think it's going to be a template for growth in this region in particular because of your groundwater use. It allows you to use that groundwater to the maximum ability for that potable use, and it reduces your reliance on having to build lots of water treatment capacity with that reverse osmosis, which is a tricky technology in terms of how to get rid of some of the brine that's reduced, the byproduct. So what we're proposing is that Lockwood would provide the potable water for the indoor use, as well as the sanitary sewer service. And because of that, we'd be proposing different water use and dedication requirements compared to the current town code, because we're only talking about that indoor use component instead of both indoor and outdoor. So what we'd be seeking approval from the board would be authorization for this separate non-potable system within the town. And then these different water dedication amounts to go with just the indoor component. Okay, this slide, I think, really drives home what the good difference is between what we'd be proposing at Highlands development as compared to what we've seen in the Silver Peaks. And I'll just step back really quick too. The reason I picked the Silver Peaks development is because, number one, we have good data from the town, and thank you for Chris for providing that. And these are similar type of homes that we're proposing at the Highlands. So it's a really good proxy, I believe, of what we already have in town and good data from what we have in town to what would be proposed to be built. So on the left-hand side is what a typical, on average, Silver Peaks home uses. And that blue portion of that bar at the bottom is how much water gets used in the wintertime, it gets used in the indoor component. About 0.15 acre feet per year gets used inside the home. And then as noted, about 95% of that water gets returned back to the wastewater. So if you think about how you use water in your home, you turn on the faucet, you wash your hands, and that water just goes to the drain. Okay, you flush the toilet, the water goes down the drain, down to the wastewater plant. So 95% of the water that you actually use in your home ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. In Silver Peaks, the outdoor use is this orange component. So this is basically that summer component, that hump on the graph, on that annual graph. And that brings the average use to about 0.34 acre feet. So about half of that water use, a little more than half in the Silver Peaks areas for outdoor irrigation. And then the gray on top of that is a byproduct of what happens at your water treatment plant. So you have to pump a certain amount of water. You run it to your water treatment plant, and some of that actually gets sent to the wastewater treatment plant because it's brine. So the water that comes out of the wells has a salinity level, and the reverse osmosis reduces that salinity. Well, you get one part that you get good quality, low salinity water that goes to your homes. The other part of that water gets concentrated with all that salt that was being removed. And so that salt is what we call the brine, the byproduct of this water treatment process. But that ends up going to your wastewater treatment. So your well actually has to pump 0.45 acre feet to get 0.34 acre feet actually delivered to your home. So in Highlands, what we would be proposing is the exact same indoor use, 0.15 acre feet is what we would expect for actual use in Highlands. And because that's the only water use that the town is providing, the amount of brine byproduct would also be less. So this is just a schematic. I won't go through this in incredible detail, but this is a schematic of how that typically works in a Silver Peaks home. You have that amount that's pumped from the well. It goes to the water treatment plant. Some of it gets shipped off to your home, and some of it gets turned into that concentrated brine, goes into the sewer system, out to the wastewater plant. In a typical home, you have about 47,000 gallons per year making it into the sewer system. It's treated at the wastewater treatment plant. And about 60,000 gallons per year is used for outdoor irrigation. What Highlands would be proposing is not changing any of those things, besides replacing that 60,000 gallons per year that is used for outdoor use with this separate dual system. So the town would be providing still the same amount of water per home just for the indoor use component. And you can see these numbers that are crossed out are the typical Silver Peaks numbers. And the numbers above them are what would be proposed for just the indoor use component. So what it really boils down to is on a per home basis, you've got, you have to pump almost 150,000 gallons per home from your well. And for the Highlands development, it'd be down to about 67,000 gallons per home for the well, just to meet that indoor use component. The other important aspect is the consumptive use. This is the amount of water that is removed from that system. And it's basically the amount of water that the town has to bring through Bar Lake and replace to the BBC canal to offset those pumping depletions. And because we're talking about an indoor use system only, the consumptive use is much, much lower on an indoor component only. So at the Highlands, a typical Highlands home that's indoor use only, we'd only be looking at about 3,000 gallons of consumptive use for the indoor component. That's the same as what happens at a Silver Peaks home, except for that outdoor use. So the outdoor use is about 54,000 gallons per year at a Highlands, at a Silver Peaks home. So what's the difference where that consumptive use is coming from? Well, that's what's coming from the new non-potable supply. We'd have a similar level of water consumption overall, just the part that's being treated by the town has a very much lower water consumption component than a typical home. So some preliminary land use and water demand numbers for the development. Again, these are preliminary, just based on some of the planning that's been done to date. We're looking at that industrial component, about 2.1 million square feet. That will end up using about 45 acre feet of water per year. That's the amount of water that gets delivered to that building. That's used mostly for indoor uses, bathrooms, showers, kitchens, and whatnot in businesses. And then we have multifamily units and single family units, about 1,500 single family units and 1,100 or so multifamily units. And the treated water use then is based on just that indoor component. So Silver Peaks on average uses about 0.15 acre feet per single family home. So we've bumped that up to 0.2 acre feet for planning purposes here. So that gives us about 318 acre feet of water for the single family homes that would be needed to be supplied to those homes. Multifamily is about half that rate. Apartments are usually quite a bit lower than a single family home. That all boils down to 478 acre feet total of use. When you add in the pumping that has to happen to get the water to your treatment plants, a little over 600 acre feet. Consumption is that 5% of that. What doesn't return back to the wastewater treatment plant, 24 acre feet. And then the outdoor use that would be provided by United Water and Sand or an authority that joins these metro districts to United Water and Sand would provide this 487 acre feet of water for the outdoor use component. Okay, so just a little bit more on the dual system. As I mentioned before, that irrigation water gets supplied through a completely separate set of pipes. So there's different water meters, different set of pipes in the ground that provides this water, completely independent of the potable water supply. That water does get chlorinated and disinfected, but it's not treated like your potable water supply. Yeah.
Right, I'm just wondering, so if I'm growing tomatoes in my garden, can I use that water to water?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and we'll come to that. There's a few things about the water quality that we'll talk about in a minute, but yeah, great question. The other thing that's important to understand is that there would be restrictions to prevent outdoor use of water. Things like these homes would not have an outdoor spigot on the home connected to the potable system. They'd have an outdoor spigot probably on a, an independent, I call them a pump, but basically a hydrant connected to the non-potable system. And there'd be no changes to existing customers. This infrastructure is not a proposal throughout the town or through any other existing customers, just to the Highlands development. It's not entirely common here, but it is happening in Colorado. So there's other providers nearby. South Adams Water and Sand District has a non-potable system that they do this similar process for. Town of Windsor, their new developments are requiring this dual system. Great Rock North, just a little bit northeast of here, has this type of system. Left Hand Water District, just to our west here, they have the approvals in place, although they have not implemented it yet. And then if you look to the west slope, the town of Silt, near Glenwood Springs has this type of system. And then the Grand Junction region also has kind of dual system irrigation systems in some of their neighborhoods. And then also outside of Colorado, there's a lot of areas, particular that I'm aware of near Boise, Idaho, where this is a very common thing and everyone has an irrigation stop heater in their backyard. So some of the advantages we've talked about already, there's a lot that lower peak demand on your water treatment plant allows you to basically serve 4 homes for the price of 1 because you don't have to build out that capacity. You'd reduce that amount of brine that is going to your wastewater treatment plant. You have less of an impact on the aquifer because you're pumping. And you're also able to optimize the use of these local water rights. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but there are other water rights in this area that are not easily incorporated into the potable system, but that could be incorporated into the non-potable system. The challenges are it's more costly for the developer than a single system because you're putting in now 2 sets of pipes where normally you put in 1. Some of those costs get offset because you don't have to buy as much water treatment plant capacity. Some of the water quality management, exactly what you got to, Trustee Westcott. There's some issues if the water is too saline that deciduous trees, coniferous like pines have troubles with it, but that's when it's higher TDS. I think we've got lower TDS where it's not going to be that much of a concern. And then you also have some separate systems with separate billing systems, separate meters, so a little bit more administrative work. This is a list of water rights, and I won't go through all these in detail, but these are water rights that are owned or controlled by Southwell Holdings that are ready to go into this system. And so we have some FRICO shares. There's some contract water that's also delivered through that FRICO system. And then there's some other junior water rights in reservoirs on the South Platte River. And that water would eventually get delivered in the same way that Lochbuie's water is delivered through that BV pipeline and into Bar Lake and released out to Bar Lake to the system. There's also Denver Basin non-tributary water. These are the deeper wells that would be kind of as a backstop in case of a really dry year. So just a summary of these components. Let's start kind of go from left to right here, but we've got different components of your water system. The water treatment plant and the PIFs, the plant investment that the town charges currently. So what we'd be proposing to do for that is using the same commercial industrial uses as per the town code. So the town already has a prescribed water tap fee or a PIF for commercial industrial use. We'd propose a reduced residential PIF because we only need 1/4 of that capacity per home as compared to a typical home that has that indoor and outdoor use. And we would use the same wastewater treatment PIFs for the town code because the amount of water going to the wastewater plant doesn't change, taking away that outdoor. The second part then is the augmentation plan. That's the water rights replacement aspect. So the dedication, we would be basing the dedication based on the consumption and the indoor use. And we propose to use a model similar to what was done for Silver Peaks of having certificates that are equal to enough consumptive use for a single home. Those certificates then would be turned in and redeemed by a developer to be able to build that home. We'd also want to look at defining an upper limit on the pumping, and that's meant to fit within or at least put some constraints or bookends on how much water this development would be using in terms of how much water wells can pump under the existing water rights. And then Southwell Holdings is willing to provide some money to help with the new augmentation plan. And then lastly, on the augmentation plan, the source of water that United and Southwell Holdings has identified bring to the town for this dedication requirement is more than what we think is going to be needed for this particular development, to provide an additional water source for the town for additional growth. And then the third part of this proposal then would be the non-potable system. So the non-potable system would be maintained by United or an authority that's formed from the various metro districts served by the non-potable system. Those water rights would then continue to be owned by that district or authority that's maintaining that system. And the delivery amount would be comparable to the outdoor use at other lock buoys. So some questions that had come up as we were reviewing this with town staff and your consultants were, what happens if the consumptive use is higher? So one of the major questions marks in the future of water treatment for the town is this brine component. This brine component currently is going to your wastewater treatment plant. The Colorado Department of Health and Environment, CDPHE, does not allow that for new treatment plants. So at some point, they will probably not allow that water to go to the wastewater treatment plant down the road. And when that happens, if you remember, part of your replacement was the effluent from your wastewater plant. So that component would go away. And that, in essence, just makes the amount of water that you have to bring through Bar Lake that much higher. So when we're considering that, the consumptive use could go up from that in the future. Another thing would be outdoor use. So if somebody did end up connecting their sink and wash their car with it, because again, there's no outdoor spigots, or filling up a kiddie pool, things like that, that's going to be water that doesn't make it back into the sewer system. So those I think are going to be pretty small, pretty minimal, and I don't think overall will affect the total amount based on those averages that we've talked about. And then delivery losses to lock buoys. So this is basically what's the source of water that's coming from Bar Lake? And we want to make sure that we actually have accounted for any losses that happen on its way to Bar Lake. So any amount that we've talked about in terms of the consumptive use dedication already has those built in. So how much water has to be delivered to lock buoy? And then let's look at what are the losses happen between the source and that location. That gets added to the dedication. So these dedication amounts I'm talking about are delivered at lock buoy. And then what action is required by the board? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, these are asks that will come to the board as this project moves forward. The first would be to approve a separate non-potable system for Highlands that would be constructed by United, or again, this authority of the metro districts being served by the non-potable system, and that the water rights would be owned by United or this authority. So this is different than existing town code, where the town owns the water rights and owns the water system. The second would be to approve the consumptive use dedication amounts for one single family equivalent tap. And that would be 0.03 acre feet per single family tap for the potable indoor use. Again, that's the consumptive amount. That's the amount of water that is lost to the system. It's that difference between how much water makes it to the house and how much water makes it back to the BBC canal as wastewater. That difference is the 0.03. That's what would be brought into Bar Lake. And then a right of first refusal on a lease back at 0.02 L needed for the brine disposal. So what we've done is that 0.03 actually looks at what happens if the town can't use that brine anymore and that water is just lost. So that's kind of the worst case scenario down the road if CDPHE ever says, hey, you can't put this brine back to your wastewater plant. So 0.03 is actually about 3 times higher than actually occurs. And so what Southwell Holding is proposing to do is dedicating that full amount, expecting that at some point in the future it would happen, but would like a first right of refusal to be able to use that difference until that happens. And then the last thing would be the plant investment fees for the water treatment capacity. So as I mentioned before, that's kind of a 4-to-1 savings in terms of just meeting indoor use as opposed to indoor and outdoor use. So that plant investment fee for the water treatment plant, we'd like to look at a lower a PIF for that water treatment plant because of the reduced capacity. That's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Matt. That was really, you broke it down really nicely for, easy to understand. So first off, how many gallons per acre of water did you say? 3?
Per acre foot,
Yeah, per acre.
it's about 325,000 gallons.
Okay, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, but, I thought that Lark Louie had the 6/10 of an acre of.
That's right. So the current code for dedication is 0.6 acre feet per single family home. And the data for Silver Peaks just shows that the actual use in those homes is about 0.35.
Okay, so that's not getting changed. That's not
Correct.
getting lowered, okay.
That's correct.
And then, as long as water beds don't make a comeback, I think you would be okay there.
I'm sorry, what was that?
As long as water beds don't make a comeback, I think you'll be okay with that.
Okay, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about water beds.
Does anybody else have questions?
I think I'm just interested to hear, like, what does this look like for residents? So they get 2 different water bills? Is that what happens? And is there a difference in rate because of, you don't need to treat one system?
Yes, you would get 2 separate bills. One would be from the town, just like everyone else who's connected to the town water system would get a monthly utility bill. And then there would be a separate utility bill from the Metro District for the non-potable use. And I don't think we've gotten to the point where we have defined what the rates would be. But the goal would be to keep the combined bill, at least somewhat comparable to what a typical bill would be.
I'll just comment that my dad lives in Utah and they have this, and they moved here from Colorado. I think he's figuring it out, but at first he was very confused by it. He couldn't figure out what he was supposed to do with it. So why do I have this extra pump in my yard? So I think education is probably really important.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just a quick comment. I've lived in a subdivision that had the non-potable water as well. And it actually, it was really kind of nice to have the watering and taking care of the outside stuff, and wasn't confusing, could keep the kids away from it, and it was actually quite beneficial.
I think I'm interested to hear from our staff about concerns you have about risks and maintenance this might cause, or additional overhead, or
That's perfect timing because I was going to see if, oh, no, not at all. I was going to see if Steve or Chris wanted to add anything either on this topic, this presentation, or how this fits into our overall water master planning and development.
Thank you very much.
Again, my name is Chris Sanchez with BBA Towns Water Resource Consultant. And thank you, Matt. I think that was an excellent presentation and effectively delivered. From your perspective, as far as what I think the board should be thinking about, one is just from a water resource perspective, there's no denying the benefits of this proposal. It, as far as the water rights stresses that it places on the town, it's much diminished from the conventional approach of having a water rights plan that supplies for irrigation and all that. So there are some very real water resource benefits in terms of less reverse osmosis treatment in particular, less water rights dedication that the town needs to manage and operate. Things for the town, and I don't know if you're gonna call them risks, but headaches or, you know, operational things that you should be thinking about too, is one of enforcement. The question about outdoor water use from the potable system needs to be monitored and enforced. And chances are that component of the potable system is going to be placed on the town in terms of responsibility. So just please be aware that the town would probably have that responsibility, and, you know, there'd be ways to do that, be it water bills, you know, if you see a spike in someone's summertime usage, it's pretty easy to identify someone if they're making a habit of washing their car from the potable system twice a week, you're gonna see that. But that would be a responsibility that goes beyond what you're currently doing. But it is an important input, because if that water is being used outdoors for whatever the use may be, for irrigation or for something else, that consumptive use, that part of it that doesn't go back to the wastewater treatment plant is effectively lost from the system. And it's important to understand that this dedication rate is based on a very high return flow amount going back to the effluent. So if part of that is trimmed off and used for something that's more consumptive, then that can have a very real water rights detriment. So that monitoring and enforcement will be important. The question came up about the use rate of the town's current policy under the 0.6. Recognize that what's being requested here, even with the RO component, is 0.03 per SFE. So there's a very big difference between the town's existing policy, which is 0.6, and what's being proposed here. Justifiably so, because there's a much less consumption and much less of a water rights usage that's requiring that higher dedication rate. But please be aware that we're talking, you know, roughly on the order of 5% of what would typically be dedicated. In some ways, that does force the conversation of the board level policy of the 0.6 dedication rate. So that topic is going to come up as you consider this proposal, effectively whether or not you need to think about that 0.6 rate. But that's something that I think the board's going to need to deal with here shortly anyway, because this question is going to be coming up in other contexts. Similarly, there's a multifamily component to this plan. The town does not currently have in place a multifamily for like condos and apartments type water uses. And Mr. Blith in his previous work has also presented the town with some very helpful information that helps us to dial in the multifamily component compared to single family component. But that from a policy perspective is something that the town has not yet addressed. So just please be aware that that question will likely be coming. Yeah, I mean, I do want to reiterate just some of those action items that Matt mentioned. The approval of the dual family system. And Steve, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe past boards have considered that question and were not interested in dual systems in the past because of the operational and enforcement components that have existed in the past. Frankly, I think the technology has advanced from there and the tools in place in the towns at a growth level where I think it's better equipped to handle it. But I do think that's something that you should be aware of. Yeah, so the non-potable system, that dedication rate, acceptance of the rate for this plan and the multifamily issues in terms of determining what portion of a single family equivalent for a multifamily rate. And then, you know, the fee structure that will come together. So there's definitely some things that the town's gonna need to think about, that the board consider as we advance this process, but we look forward to supporting you in that process. And happy to entertain any questions for me.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Thanks.
trustee White.
I'm just curious, I've heard of this before. I actually have a really good friend who lives in Idaho in Coeur d'Alene. So I'm aware, and I talked to some folks about, at a net zero water last year at CML, some folks from Windsor were talking about it. So I have heard about it, never actually seen it. And I have some background in utilities and buried utilities. So I'm curious as well, like, how does that work as far as like, are they gonna be in separate conduits, your guys' stuff versus the town water? Are they buried separate? And who's responsible for what's buried outside of the homeowner's property? Is that gonna be on the town?
Great question. Yeah, we're talking totally different plumbing systems.
Uh-huh.
So they would all be put in at the time of construction and development. Ownership of those systems is a good question, and maybe Drew and Matt can address that question. Yeah, I'm not sure I can tell you
Points
who.
to everybody's backyard then, right? If it's public, then
Fair
there's a right
question.
of way in
Yeah,
everybody's backyard.
I don't know the answer to the question, but it's an excellent question. You know, who owns those pipes? And could be the private water utility.
You can see Chris and I both have the water resource.
Standard uniform.
Yeah, the proposal that we're putting forth is that either the Metro District or United Water and Sanitation District who would construct and would own those pipes. So it'd be like another public utility in the ground. I don't think we've gotten to the level yet of figuring out where exactly they would be, whether it'd be in the street with the potable main or running through backyards. I've seen it both ways. So I think that's a decision that would come down the road, but the non-potable system would be owned by that authority or water district.
Thank you for all the great information tonight. Go ahead. You're good.
I have questions about my questions. In terms of the enforcement question, do we have a mechanism now for that? Is that something that we've had discussion, have to invest in some sort of system?
We've had preliminary discussions on that. We are, our first step was to, present this to the board. This is just a discussion, so there'll be no vote taken tonight, but there are many moving pieces and parts to this that we'll be working on with everybody, specifically for those in question. And I think it was Steve who mentioned some of the technology that has gotten better to help us, so we can be utilize that technology to help us in some of those, but yeah, definitely more work to be done on our end on those questions as we work through and develop this for this project.
And also, and I promise this is the last one, has there been discussion or are there impacts that we're assuming are going to happen in terms of our planning around our water treatment?
Yes, there are both water and wastewater as we're working on the expansion of both. This topic has come up, especially, what we do with some of the brine. We're working on some other solutions to that and how we can backfill that. And I'm way out of my depth. I see Steve kind of standing up there. Is there anything you want to add for Matt?
Thank you. I'm Steve Jeffers with the law firm of Lyons Gaddis. We're the town's water rights attorneys. I'll pick up on that one first. So we've had some very good comprehensive meetings between staff and consultants on both the water plant and the sewer plant, sharing a lot of information across our various expertise. It's really been a nice process. A lot of meetings, but I think we're sharing a lot of good ideas. This type of a project has been discussed because it will impact the water plant. Actually in a good way, because any planning for the water plant means it will last longer as you propose to build it. If you're running less water through there, not running all that irrigation water through. So that can help us get more water for the homes and businesses. So that's really helpful. On the sewer plant side, we've been trying to figure out what does that do in terms of the RO waste, and ultimately, will there be RO waste going to that plant? That also similarly has the benefit of increasing the amount of water or effluent you can treat at that plant. So that's been very helpful to know that these things are coming along, and your decision on how to deal with the first applicant who's requesting a dual system, you may set a precedent and say, yeah, our policy is that we favor this, but we favor it in a way where there's an entity in place who can actually build this infrastructure and operate it. And I think Chris mentioned that former boards have been opposed to this concept, never been really laid out in quite this much detail. And sometimes that's based upon who the developer is and the level of attention they've given to it. Sometimes they just throw it out there as an idea to save, so they don't have to dedicate as much water to you, and they'll figure it out. This applicant, I think, is more sophisticated than that and can probably do a better job. So I think it's good that they're making this proposal. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Chris did a really good job of hitting most of the major points. We're still in discussions with them. I do support a dual system. I think it's a very good idea, particularly when you see the town running out of capacity in the water plant, or even just planning in the future, and you say, well, how do we make our investment in these plants last longer? And how do we avoid treating so much water? So this is, I like the concept. The details we're still trying to work out. Chris mentioned the policies that you have in place. The 0.6 acre feet of dedication right now is consumptive use. That's been the dedication requirement for a long time. Although frankly, a lot of the developers that have been coming to you over the past years have old annexation agreements that have lower numbers. And so they've been coming in with these much lower numbers. This one is significantly lower in all of those, but that's because they're dividing out the irrigation and indoor uses, which have very different return flow components. So you may or may not need to address policy overall in terms of water dedication. But this particular developer, because they want a dual system, are asking for an exception. And so the things we're still looking at, and we'll be talking with them some more and talking internally and then talking with you, is on the consumptive use dedication, is 0.03 acre feet per SFE the right number? Does that have adequate safety factors for the town? And maybe it does, I don't know yet. But that's something we're still discussing with them. The request for a right of first refusal, the ability to lease back the water that they earmark as being current RO water, that if we don't lose that until sometime in the future, they want to be that water. That's unusual. Right now, the RO loss is something that we factor into every dedication as just a safety factor for the town. They're asking to lease back kind of the safety factor. It just makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And it's just a little unusual. So that's something we're going to be discussing with them also. And on the ownership of the raw water, I just don't know how you feel about that. I don't know how we feel about it, staff and consultants, as to whether, sure, you can have a dual system, but to protect the town's customers, do we want to own that water and have them deliver it, or should they own it and deliver it? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to probably do a little bit of research on some of these other entities they do. Part of that is just maybe feeling like you have adequate security in the water for your customers. Do you need to own it to do that, or do you just need a good contract with the raw water provider for the dual system? So those are things we're going to look at and discuss with them before we come back with a full proposal to you. And as Chris mentioned on the multifamily, excuse me. You don't have a policy in place. There's been one proposal before that's still out there for multifamily, and we're looking at various numbers. But there are more people who want to develop and have multifamily, and now is a really good time for us to come back to the town with the proposal from staff as to what we think is a reasonable dedication. You know, it's just probably certainly as a fraction of a regular single-family equivalent, but how much? At 3/4, is it a half, is it a quarter, what is that? Or what's it based upon? And so we're doing some work on that. We'll be discussing that some more with them. But we need to really come back to you with the proposal to say this is what we think is a reasonable way to deal with that. And then other developers, as they're coming in, can also know that if you actually have a written policy to do. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Anybody else with anything else? My head is literally swimming. Next up are some executive sessions. I believe we could make a motion as one, including both of the topics for the executive session. Is there a motion?
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-64024B with town council for legal advice on pending litigation and annexation matters, as well as an executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024F to discuss a personnel matter with the subject of the executive session, consenting to such discussion being held in executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee White,
Yes.
Mayor Jeffrey,
Yes.
trustee Tapey,
Yes.
trustee Bristow,
Yes.
trustee Westcott,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cohen.
Yes.
And the motion carries. I think we'll probably just stay in here, give a few minutes for other folks to head out.